Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So this is the video for part 1, chapter 4, hypothesis testing. Okay, so this is actually sambungan daripada chapter 3 on estimation. So I do believe that you all are very familiar with claims. Okay, for example, you tengok satu advertisement dekat television and dia kata this product can make you become fairer, or if you bring this product, okay, you will lose weight. So claim-claim yang diorang buat ni, okay, betul atau tidak? So kalau kita nak check, okay, kita nak test whether claim ini betul atau tidak, itulah yang kita namakan as hypothesis testing. So how to determine whether this claim or hypothesis are true? Okay, so kita guna hypothesis testing. So hypothesis testing is a test to evaluate claims about the population using sample data. So kalau you nak test claims, okay, and claims ini berkenaan dengan quantitative data. Bila kata quantitative data, berkenaan dengan quantitative data atau variables lah, okay. So kalaulah level of measurementnya ratio atau interval scale measurement, okay, where kita boleh calculate the mean, thus we can use mean for hypothesis testing. Tetapi jika variable ataupun data yang you nak test ini, okay, dia punya level of measurement dia adalah nominal atau ordinal, where we cannot calculate dia punya mean because dia categorical data, dia tak ada mean. Thus we cannot use mean, but we can use proportion for hypothesis testing. But in our syllabus, okay, kita hanya cover data yang berbentuk kuantitatif, where dia punya level of measurement sekurang-kurangnya interval scale measurement. So in this first part, okay, kita akan tengok hypothesis testing for one sample only. So the one sample t-test is used when you have data from a single sample of participant and you wish to know whether the mean of the population from which the sample is drawn is the same as hypothesized mean, right? So one sample t-test untuk single sample, where kita nak test mean of the population ini sama ke tak sama from the hypothesized mean. Hypothesized mean ni adalah satu value yang you tetapkan ataupun soalan bagi, dia claim. Dia kata the population mean is equal to a certain value. So to a certain value itu adalah hypothesized mean. Okay. So we are going to compare, okay, a sample mean with a specific population mean. The generic assumption, okay, underlying all type of t-test, okay, there are 3 assumption that must be met, okay, untuk t-test ni. Pertama sekali, the scale of measurement, okay, the data should be at least interval scale of measurement. So bila kata at least interval, then dia boleh jadi interval atau ratio scale measurement. Yang kedua, random sampling. So random sampling di sini adalah the scores or the data should be randomly sampled from the population of interest. And last but not least is normality, where the scores or the data should be normally distributed in the population. So each statistical test, okay, biasanya ada assumption yang dia mesti penuhi. So this assumption need to be evaluated because the accuracy of test interpretation depends on whether the assumptions are violated or not. So ini sedikit teori, okay, on one sample test. So ingatlah sikit on assumption underlying all type of t-test ni, scale of measurement, random sampling and normality. Apa maksud setiap satu assumption tu lah. Okay, takut nanti ditanya dalam exam. Alright, so untuk hypothesis testing, tak kira lah untuk one sample ke, ataupun lepas ni kita akan tengok between two population mean, kita juga akan tengok dependent sample. These are the steps, okay, yang you perlu ingat, yang you perlu follow. Okay, these are the steps. Fixed step you follow, you should be able to answer properly. So, since tadi kita nak test sama ada the claim is true or not, so the first step you need to do is you need to state the statistical hypothesis, ataupun you perlu bagi tahu what are your hypothesis. Okay, kita ada dua hypothesis yang you perlu listkan, okay, yang you perlu state dalam your answer. The first one is null hypothesis, denoted as H null. Okay, where this null hypothesis state that there is no difference between parameter and the value specific of between the two parameters lah. Okay, so kita nak bagi tahu dalam null hypothesis ni there is no difference between the parameter and the hypothesized value. Lagi satu, nama dia alternative hypothesis. Alternative hypothesis biasanya denoted as H1, or ada setengah buku dia pakai H8. Okay, H1 state the claims. Apa yang soalan claim? Okay, state that there is a difference between the parameter and the specific value, ataupun between two parameter. Alright, so kita ada a few ways, okay, depending on the test is a one-tail test or it's a two-tail test. We have left-tail test, two-tail test, and right-tail test. So the left and right-tail test ini sometimes called one-tail test. Okay, sebab dia one-sided. Apa maksud saya one-sided? Claim dia less than or greater than. Contoh, dia kata kalau you study 8 hours per day, your marks will be greater than 90%. Dia claim kalau you study 8 jam sehari, markah you lebih besar daripada 90%. So dia one-sided. Ataupun dia kata kalau you exercise 3 days a week, your weight akan turun. So dia one-sided, turun. Okay? Tapi kalaulah you ada satu claim yang dia kata kalau you kalau two-sided, okay, contoh je lah. Dia kata kalau you buat this activity, then you punya mean, okay, akan jadi different than 50. So different than 50 ni, dia boleh jadi lagi besar or dia boleh jadi lagi kecil, as long as dia tak sama dengan 50. So dia jadi two-sided. Boleh jadi besar pun ya, jadi kecil pun ya. So that is a two-tail test. Alright? So you need to identify the claims. Dalam soalan, bila dia bagi, awak kena identify claim ini one-sided ke ataupun two-sided. Because nanti, the way we are going to test the hypothesis berbeza bergantung kepada dia one-tail or two-tail. So, we try to find evidence, okay, to reject the null hypothesis. Bila kita buat hypothesis testing, apa yang kita cuba buat adalah kita cuba nak reject the null hypothesis. Okay, kita cuba cari evidence untuk reject the null hypothesis. Okay, if we reject the null hypothesis, then we accept the alternative hypothesis. Kalau reject null hypothesis, accept alternative hypothesis. But however, if we fail to reject the null hypothesis, kita only conclude that there is insufficient evidence to reject the null hypothesis. It does not mean that the null hypothesis is true. So, fahamkan ayat saya di sini. Okay. Bila kita buat hypothesis testing, kita cuba cari evidence untuk reject the null hypothesis. Okay. So, kalau kita berjaya cari evidence untuk reject the null hypothesis, then kita kata kita accept the claim. Kita accept the alternative hypothesis. But if we do not reject, if we fail to reject the null hypothesis, tidak bermaksud kita terima null hypothesis tu. Okay? Kita bukan kata kita accept, tetapi kita tak ada cukup evidence untuk reject. Tak bermakna dia betul. Okay? So, that is tadi tu step number 1. Kita state apa hypothesis kita. Step kedua, okay, we need to find the critical values. So, critical values separate the critical region with non-critical region. So, critical region, okay, is a range of values of the test value that indicate that there is a significant difference and H null should be rejected. Okay, critical region ini adalah area di mana kita perlu reject our null hypothesis. So, non-critical region vice versa lah. Okay, ini satu contoh dalam gambar rajah ni. Okay, normally distributed. So, kalau you ada two-tail test, then kita ada dua critical region. This side and this side. Kalau your test value berada dalam your critical region, then we reject our null hypothesis. If we do not reject, dia seharusnya berada di non-critical region. So, critical value is this value. Kita nak cari apa value yang memisahkan antara critical region dengan non-critical region. So that later, kita boleh buat conclusion sama ada nak reject atau tidak. Okay, so saya tunjukkan di sini. Okay, the critical region. Okay, depending on your test is a two-tail test, a left tail or a right tail test. Okay, a two-tail test adalah di mana your claim itu two-sided. Dia simply kata awak punya population mean is different from a certain value. So it's different from a certain value. Dia boleh jadi lagi besar atau dia boleh jadi lagi kecil. So your critical area ataupun critical region is two-sided. And kalau you perasan, dia tulis sini alpha over 2. But bila you ada one tail test, tak kisahlah one tail ni sama ada dia left tail or right tail, dia hanya one-sided. Kalau left tail, critical region dia berada di sebelah kiri. And kalau awak perasan dekat sini, nanti nak cari critical value guna alpha, bukan alpha over 2. Right tail on the right. Same here, kita guna alpha. Kita akan reject kalau the test value is within the critical region. So later saya akan tunjuk lagi. So this is roughly what we are going to do later. Okay. So nak cari critical values, still guna table yang sama dalam estimation. Okay. So bila masa nak guna Z table when you have a large sample. Okay. Large sample tu berapa? When your N is greater than 30. But bila dia small sample, kita pakai table number 7 for T distribution. Now, step number 3 dalam hypothesis testing. Okay. Kita test di hypothesis. Kita nak test hypothesis tu. So, untuk test di hypothesis, kita ada 3 method. So, nak pakai methods yang mana bergantung kepada soalan. If soalan specifically ask you to use the p-value, then you use the p-value. But if the question did not mention anything on which type of method you should use, then you may use any method, because no matter which method you choose, you will end up with the same conclusion. Alright? So what are the 3 methods? The first one is traditional method. The second one is the p-value method. And the third one is by using the confidence interval. So I give you an example straight away. So if, for example, you were given the statistics for a one sample T test. So you all dah pernah tengok sebelum ni. Tapi saya just nak ulang lagi sekali di sini. Dalam descriptive statistics punya table yang dibagi ni, N adalah number of sample. This mean adalah your sample mean X bar. Standard deviation S. Standard error ini adalah S over search N. So this is another table for one sample test. So test value dekat sini adalah your hypothesized mean. Okay, mean yang soalan claim. Okay, T dekat sini is your test value. Degree of freedom N minus 1. Significant to tail, this is your P value. Mean difference adalah your sample mean minus dengan your hypothesized mean. Okay, so bin awak 62, hypothesized mean 60, that's why dapat 2.580. And this part is your confidence interval. Now, always remember that confidence interval ni, dia boleh bagi 95%, dia boleh bagi you 90% or 99%. Kalau soalan kata 95%, you can straight away ambil daripada SPSS output yang diberi. Tetapi jika soalan minta 90% or 99%, tapi dalam output dia bagi 95%, then you kena calculate balik manually, sama macam you calculate dalam chapter 3. Okay, your X bar plus minus your critical value darab dengan your standard error. Alright, so tadi saya dah explain step 1, state your hypothesis. So dalam contoh ni saya bagi hypothesis, null hypothesis mu sama dengan 60. Tapi soalan claim mu is different from 60. That's why different from 60 is not equal to 60. This is an example of two-tailed test. Sebab bila you kata different, dia boleh jadi less, dia boleh jadi lagi besar atau dia boleh jadi lagi kecil. Find the critical value. So, dalam soalan ni, saya tak mention, kita pakai 95% CI, confidence interval. So, since awak punya N adalah 50, which is a large sample, kita pakai Z table. Kenapa alpha over 2? Sebab this is a two-tailed test, alpha bahagi 2. Go to table number 4, pergi ke alpha 0.025, okay, sebab 0.5 bahagi 2 dapat 0.025, with simply go to Z alpha per 2, okay, you pergi dekat table number 4, cari alpha 0.025, tak ada degree of freedom sebab this is a large sample, and you akan dapat critical value awak plus minus 1.96, sama macam dalam chapter 3. Step 3, test the hypothesis based on the method asked in the question. So dalam contoh ni saya explain ketiga-tiga cara. Okay, kalau disuruh test hypothesis using traditional method, okay, kita nak pakai statistical test. So, numerical value obtained from a statistical test is called a test value. Ni, you kena cari you punya test value. Okay? So, kalau you ada N greater than or equal to 30, okay, you cari Z sama dengan X bar minus mu naught bahagi dengan your standard error. Bila masa pakai sigma, bila the population variance is known ataupun population standard deviation is known. Soalan bagi tahu population variance or population standard deviation. Tetapi jika dalam soalan dia tak bagi tahu your population variance or standard deviation, kita estimate menggunakan S. Okay. So, X bar here is your sample mean. And mu naught ini adalah your hypothesized mean. Okay. Tetapi jika you ada sampel yang kecil, lebih kecil daripada 30, kita pakai T. Okay, but yang lain-lain semua sama. Okay, with degree of freedom N minus 1. So, dalam contoh tadi, okay, kalau soalan kata guna statistical test, then awak kena cari Z atau T. Dalam soalan ni, because you ada N50, then kita pakai Z. Sebab N greater than or equal to 30. Kenapa kita pakai X bar minus mu naught bahagi dengan standard deviation over set N? Kita pakai standard deviation sebab kalau soalan tak bagi population standard deviation. So, daripada statistical table yang diberi ataupun daripada SPSS output, X bar is this one, X bar. Standard deviation S is here. And here, sebenarnya kalau dah ada standard error, 2.337 itu adalah S over set N. Okay, so awak boleh tengok dekat sini, X bar minus mu naught dapat 2.580. 2.580 ni sebenarnya dalam SPSS output pun selalunya dia dah bagi your mean difference. You dapat 1 And ini sebenarnya juga sometimes dalam soalan dia dah bagi. Okay, your t-test. So, kalau soalan dah bagi, biasanya dia akan minta you show that. Okay, the statistical ataupun the test value is equal to 1.104. So, you just have to show lah. Sometimes dia tak bagi dalam tu, dia suruh you calculate. Same goes to your standard error. 2.337 ni. Sometimes soalan kata show that the standard error is equal to 2.337. So you kena buat balik dan pastikan jawapannya sama dengan apa yang SPSS output bagi dekat awak. So this is your test value 1.104. Ini kalau guna traditional method. Kalaulah soalan suruh you test hypothesis using p-value. So p-value is actually the simplest one here. Sebab apa? In our syllabus, awak tak belajar macam mana nak cari p-value. Apa yang awak perlu buat sebenarnya hanyalah ambil sahaja nilai p-value daripada SPSS output. Soalan takkan suruh you calculate the p-value. Apa yang you perlu buat adalah awak hanya perlu baca saja daripada SPSS output. Now, if you notice dekat sini, SPSS output untuk one sample test, dia bagi awak sig.2til. So, 0.275 ini adalah p-value untuk 2-tail test. So, kalau you ada 2-tail test, straight away ambil 0.275. But, if awak tengah buat 1-tail test, then the p-value awak kena bahagi dengan 2. So, instead of terus ambil 0.275, awak kena ambil 0.275 dibahagi dengan 2. So, this is a p-value for 1-tail. Kena bahagi dengan 2. Okay, this is for t-test. Okay, now if the question asks you to test the hypothesis using confidence interval method, so this one can only be done for 2-tail tests. So to calculate manually, sama macam chapter 3, where nak cari confidence interval adalah x bar plus minus your margin of error, which is your critical value, multiply dengan your standard error, which is your x bar plus minus z alpha over 2 ataupun t alpha over 2 degree of freedom n minus 1 multiply dengan s bahagi set n. Okay, but sometimes, okay, soalan tak minta you kira pun, dia just minta awak ambil daripada output given. But please make sure that you perhatikan betul-betul soalan suruh pakai berapa persen confidence level and dia bagi berapa persen. Sometimes the question will trick you. Dia kata at 90% confidence in 90% confidence, okay, and dia bagi awak 95% confidence interval. So dia tanya 90, dia bagi 95, you tak boleh ambil, you kena calculate manually. But if soalan memang nak pakai 95% confidence interval, awak boleh terus ambil daripada output. Cuma bezanya di sini, soalan ataupun SPSS output bagi awak 95% confidence interval of the difference. Okay, perbezaan. Ini adalah confidence interval untuk perbezaan di antara dua mean. Okay, sample mean dengan hypothesized mean. But kita nak cari 95% confidence interval untuk mean itu sendiri. Bukan beza mean tetapi mean itu sendiri. So what you need to do is you need to add your lower and upper boundary dengan your test value here. So in this case, your 95% confidence interval for the mean will be negative 2.12 plus 60 and then 7.28 plus 60. So inilah awak punya confidence interval untuk mean. Yang ini confidence interval untuk perbezaan di antara dua mean. So dia tak sama. Okay. So pastikan awak tambahkan dengan your test value. So now kita dah tengok 3 method to test your hypothesis. So macam mana nak tahu whether to reject or not to reject? So itu step 4. So dalam step 4, we are going to make decision whether to reject or not to reject our H null. So kita ada 3 method. Untuk the first method, traditional method, if the test value is in the critical region, we reject H null. If the test value is in the non-critical region, we do not reject H null. So test value ni apa yang tadi tu? Sama ada Z atau T, X bar minus hypothesized mean bagi S over set N. Okay, ataupun T tadi tu lah. Okay. So, nanti kita tengok. Okay, ini basically how to decide. Okay. If awak menggunakan the second method, Pvalue method, if the P-value is less than or equal to your alpha value, we reject H null. If the P-value is greater than your alpha value, we do not reject H null. And for the third method, confidence interval method, if the hypothesized value is not in the confidence interval, kita reject. If the hypothesized value is in the confidence interval, thus we do not reject. So secara teorinya, inilah dia. Lepas ni saya tunjuk ke awak macam mana sebenarnya nak decide. Okay. Now lepas you dah decide, kita make conclusion. So kita nak make conclusion ni, kita bagi tahu whether there is sufficient evidence to reject or not to reject, or insufficient evidence to not reject your H null. Lepas tu you explain to support the claim lah. Okay. So kita tengok tadi, sebelum kita tengok example, now there are 2 type of error, okay, dalam hypothesis testing ni. Okay, kalaulah dia bagi contoh dekat sini, H null, the defendant is innocent. H alternative, the defendant is not, if the defendant is guilty. So kalaulah, okay, your null hypothesis is true, but you reject your null hypothesis, then you dah commit type 1 error. But if your null hypothesis is false, but you do not reject, then you commit type 2 error. But biasa kita pakai type 1 error lah, alpha. So type 1 error, also known as the level of significance, is very important in hypothesis testing, as it states the risk of rejecting the null hypothesis. Okay, when the hypothesis is true. Okay, so biasa kita pakai alpha 0.1, 0.05, 0.25 lah. But ada lagi alpha-alpha yang lain, tapi ini yang common. Okay, so now kita nak tengok example so that I can explain to you again betul-betul macam mana nak buat step 3, step 4. Okay, we look at example number 1. Okay, this is actually from the previous example, but here is a proper full question lah. Okay, dia kata dalam soalan ini, okay, how much time do executives spend each day reading and sending email? So a survey was conducted by XYZ company, and the responses in minute were analyzed by the computer output below. At alpha 0.05, is there enough evidence to indicate the amount of time spent by all executive reading and sending email differ from 60 minutes? So, dia buat satu claim. Okay, dia tanya, cukup tak evidence to show that executive spend reading and sending email differ from 60? Maksud differ dekat sini, dia tak sama dengan 60. Bila tak sama dengan 60, dia boleh jadi kurang daripada 60, dia boleh jadi lebih besar daripada 60. So, it's a two-tailed test. So, dia bagi you SPSS output. One sample statistics. N 50, X bar 62.58, standard deviation 16.528, standard error which is S bahagi set N adalah 2.337. Second output, the one sample test. T, your test value. Degree of freedom N-1. This is your P value for two-tail. This is your mean difference, X bar minus mu naught. And this is your 95% CI, but you need to add with 60. Kenapa? This is the difference. Kita nak cari 95% CI for the mean. Okay, so from the SPSS output, soalan tanya, is there enough evidence to indicate that the mean amount of time spent by all executive reading and sending email differ from 60 minutes? So this is an example of hypothesis testing. So apa you perlu buat? Follow the steps. So step number 1, state the statistical hypothesis. Ada dua, hypothesis awak should have null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Disebabkan tadi dia tanya differ from 60, so kita pakai simbol tak sama dengan 60. Null hypothesis sama dengan 60. It's a two-tailed test. Kenapa two-tailed? So boleh jadi less than 60, boleh jadi greater than 60. Step 2, find the critical values. Since soalan kata pakai alpha 0.05 and n greater than or equal to 30, large sample, we refer Z table. Z alpha over 2. Kenapa dekat sini alpha over 2? Because this is a two-tailed test. Alpha dibahagi dengan 2. Dapat plus minus 1.69. So, sebenarnya apa maksud dia? Okay, this is your normal curve. Critical value awak yang awak dapat tu ini. Negatif 1.96, positif 1.96 untuk alpha over 2 sama dengan 0.025. Bermaksud apa-apa yang berada lebih besar daripada positif 1.96 atau apa-apa yang lebih kecil daripada negatif 1.96, kita katakan value itu berada di dalam kawasan critical region. Critical region, kita reject our H null. Itu maksud critical values di sini. So, step 3, kita nak test our hypothesis. So, since soalan tak ada bagi tahu specifically which method dia nak awak pakai, saya tunjukkan all three methods. So, if kita pakai traditional method, this is our test value 1.104. Our P value is here 0.275. Tidak perlu bahagi dengan 2 because this is a two-tailed test. And our 95% CI adalah 57.88 dan 67.28. Ini terbalik ni. Betul kan ya? It should be negative 2.12 plus 60, 7.28 plus 60. Okay, bila dah siap step 3, kita masuk step number 4. Okay, so kita tengok how to make decision, okay, based on the 3 methods. Okay, if kita nak pakai traditional method, macam mana nak decide? So, based on the SPSS output tadi, kita dapat our test value 1.104. Compare with your critical value. So, since 1.104 is less than your critical value, 1.96, we do not reject H null. So, now, kalaulah you sketch the curve, your critical value is here, negative 1.96 and positive 1.96, two-tailed test. Tengah-tengah ni 0. So, your test value berada di sini lebih kurang, 1.104, which is dia berada in the non-critical region. So, kalau dia berada di non-critical region, we do not reject our H null. Kalau kita guna P-value, daripada SPSS output, dapat P-value 0.275. Soalan kata pakai alpha 0.05. So, kita compare our P-value with alpha 0.05. Now, untuk P-value, if your P-value is greater than your alpha, then we do not reject our H null. Alright? And last, kalau kita pakai confidence interval method, since the hypothesis value 60 is within the 95% confidence interval, thus we do not reject our H null. If you still remember, H null mu sama dengan 60, H alternative mu tak sama dengan 60. But you dapat you punya CI tadi 57 point something hingga 67 point something. Okay, so kalau you tengok, in between this CI, 60 ada dekat sini. Okay, 60 ada dalam 95% confident interval awak. Means that you are 95 confidence that the mean is within 57 to 67. Oh sorry, bukan 67 tadi, 62 kot kan? Alamak, nanti check balik dalam previous slide. Okay, so bila you kata 60 ada dalam that range, then you boleh conclude that it's not different than 60. So that's why we do not reject our H null. So if you notice dekat sini, no matter which method you use, your conclusion will be the same. Based on all 3 methods, we do not reject H null. So how to decide? Saya ada mention juga dalam earlier slide. Nanti you boleh tengok balik. Okay, bila masa nak reject, bila masa do not reject, kalau guna traditional method, kalau guna P-value, and kalau guna confidence interval. Now, once you have made your decision, then please don't forget to make your conclusion. So, since we do not reject our H null, apa yang you boleh conclude adalah there is not enough evidence ataupun there is insufficient evidence to indicate that the mean amount of time spent by all executive reading and sending email differ from 60 minutes. Okay, kita try untuk explain balik apa yang soalan claim. Okay. So tadi claim kata different than 60. Tapi kita tak ada enough evidence untuk indicate yang dia berbeza daripada 60. Okay. Mungkin awak masih lagi tak clear. Kita tengok another example. Example number 2. So, a random sample of 12 second year university student and less than 30 small sample enrolled in a business statistics course was drawn. At the course completion, each student was asked how many hours he or she spent doing homework in statistics. So the instructor recommended the student devote 36 hours for the whole semester. Test to determine whether there is evidence that the average student spend less than the recommended amount of time. Dia suruh tengok cukup tak evidence to show that students spend less than 36 hours. Less than one-sided. One-tail test. Guna alpha 0.05. From the SPSS output, kita tahu our n is 12, x bar 34.25, standard deviation 4.808, your standard error S bahagi sigma n is equal to 1.388. One sample test punya output, your test value negative 1.261, degree of freedom n minus 1, p value for one tail test. Ini two tail kena bahagi dengan 2. Mean difference is negative 1.750 and ini pula adalah 95% confidence interval yang you perlu add 36, perlu tambah 36. Here, your test value. So from the output, awak boleh decide which method you want to use, but please make sure that you follow step 1 until 5. Start with your hypothesis. So in this question, hypothesis sebab claim kata less than 36, so your null hypothesis will be greater than or equal to 36. It's a one-tail test. Find your critical values. At alpha 0.05, kita pakai T sebab apa n is less than 30. Kenapa alpha tak bahagi dengan 2? Because this is a one-tail test, alpha sini tak payah bahagi 2. 11 adalah degree of freedom n minus 1. So here kita dapat critical value kita negative 1.796 and because this is a one-tail test, kita ambil one-sided sahaja. Okay. So, step 3, we are going to test our hypothesis. Based on the output, kita ada tiga value. The T test value is negative 1.261. The P value must be divided by 2 because this is a one-tail test. And your confidence interval, ini juga tolong betulkan, salah ni. It should be negative 4.8 tambah 36, 1.30 tambah 36. So dapat range 31 sampai 37.30. So now kita dah ada all the values. Next, we have to decide whether to reject or not to reject our H null. Okay. So kita proceed with step number 4. So nak decide macam mana? Okay. So based on the traditional method, okay, kita dapat tadi nilainya test value negative 1.261, and kita juga dah tengok our critical value tadi T 0.05, degree of freedom 11, kita dapat negative 1.796. So if saya sketch untuk awak dekat sini, our critical value is here, negative 1.796. Okay, saya ambil left side, okay, because less than is one-sided dekat left side. Okay, so tengah-tengah ni 0. So negative 1.261 should be around here, where it is in the non-critical region. Non-critical region do not reject. If awak pakai p-value, okay, p-value dapat 0.1165, which is greater than alpha 0.05, we do not reject our H null. Kalau pakai confidence interval method juga sama. So tadi kita dapat our 95% confidence interval is 31 point something sampai 37 point something. Okay, so dia kata adakah student spend less than 36? Okay, 36 within this range, but dia punya upper limit dia 37, which is greater than 36 recommended hours. So since the upper limit for the 95% CI is 37.3, thus we do not reject our H null, because we are 95% sure that student study hour is between 31 to 37. So upper limit kita 37, which is greater than 36. That's why we do not reject our H null. So as you can see here, no matter which method you use, you will end up with the same conclusion, which is there is insufficient evidence ataupun not enough evidence to indicate that the average student spend less than the recommended amount of time of 36 hours. So conclude balik, ambil balik claim dia asal tadi, bagi tahu sama ada cukup evidence atau tidak. Okay, so I hope that you can understand apa yang saya cuba sampaikan. But if you still have any question, please do not hesitate to ask me. Okay, I am more than willing to help you. I am happy to answer all your questions. So that's all for the first part. Thank you everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.